Okay.
Who are you locking down with, you guys?
Oh, I'm with my two of my housemates. I'm kind of lucky. We're in a 4-bed, and one of us was at home visiting his family when lockdown happened. So he's like locked down with them, and he's been at home for like the past few months. But it's a 4-bed, and it's, you know, relatively spacious. It's just a studenty flat, but we're lucky that because one less of us is here, like a bit more space, and there's just one fewer body in the building, which is good.
Have you got any nice outside space near you?
Yeah, there's like Tutankhamun's not too far, so you can sort of go out there, and we've got a little bit of like scrubby grass outside our house, which is quite nice, but it catches the sun for like 5 minutes a day.
How about you, Yamin?
I'm in lockdown with my partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were laughing a couple of nights ago actually, because this is the most time I've actually spent at home since.
I can imagine.
So we're on the border of, you know, on the knife edge of falling in love with each other again and murdering each other.
Yeah.
That's better than most. I hear that like divorce and separation rates are going to go up massively.
I heard this. That's yeah, I guess that's sad.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I don't envy the people that are doing this on their own. I think that's a whole other set of challenges that must be really difficult. And a couple of my friends are in lockdown without their significant other, and I know that they're really struggling. So I'm very grateful for what we've got.
Definitely. So just to people, thank you. We've already got lots of people have joined us. Lovely to see you all. Welcome. We're going to kick off in about 2 or 3 more minutes. Just wait for everybody else to log on, and I can see it creeping up very quickly. Have you been managing to have your daily exercise, you two? No. No. Twice daily exercise now.
Everybody was doing like 5K a day, which was really terrifying for me, and I haven't really ventured into that, but I can manage a walk, you know, that's kind of my limit. I can't be doing 5K every day.
See, I'm living with children who are still into the Joe Wicks workout. So that's been
still popular?
Yeah, although I think well, not for me personally, but yes, I think it is still going well. It's good. He's done very well. He has done well.
Yeah.
I leave my house to do groceries, and that's about it. I live a fully digital lifestyle. I'm very 21st century.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I feel like I could definitely get out of bed, turn the laptop on, and then just go to bed again afterwards. Sometimes I need to like force myself to do something else just so that...
It's so sunny out. You need to take advantage of the lovely weather.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm literally on Zoom. I'm on Zoom probably at least 4 or 5 hours a day right now.
Wow, that's mad.
Yeah. And there was actually an article written, maybe I'll put it in the chat if I can find it, for everybody, about why Zoom calls are so tiring.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't surprise me, actually. Why is that?
Essentially, it boils down to the fact that when you're having these digital conversations, particularly between more than 2 people, you don't have all of the physical, non-verbal cues that you would have in a regular conversation. So actually, your mind is trying to pick up on all the subtle hints that we operate with without even realizing on a day-to-day basis. And in doing so, you're having to work that much harder just to have a simple conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And there's an additional pressure of silence on a Zoom call. So how silence facilitates conversation in a live setting, people get quite stressed out about silence over Zoom.
Yes, it's true. It's not as flowing, is it?
Well, it's just, I think because we know that we're here and there's this little box with our faces in it, there's the pressure that this is supposed to be facilitating something. So even if it's social or professional, there's supposed to be a purpose to this relationship. And if it's just silent, I guess you feel the need to fill it.
And on that note, you're going to feel lots of silence very soon. So I think we are, let me keep an eye on the time. Is it 5 past yet? So I think we're going to kick off in I think we'll kick off now, actually, because it looks a bit steady with the numbers. So if you guys are good to go, I just wanted to say hello. And my name's Josie, for those of you I haven't met before. Hopefully you've tuned into some of these events in the past. So I I'm one of the founders of Creative Access, and we are a social enterprise. We're dedicated to recruiting and supporting people from underrepresented communities to enter the creative industries and then to thrive. And we work with all sorts of organisations, from big brands through to small regional theatres, production companies, publishing houses right across the UK. Now, obviously, it's been a really strange time for us, for all of us over the last few months, and we've done whatever we can to support our community by transferring our normally physical events into virtual ones. And it's actually given us an amazing opportunity to be able to have access to speakers like these guys today, and also for people all around the country to be able to join us. So if you want to let us know where you are, you can put in the chat function, just say who you are, where you're from. It'll be lovely to hear from you. And just a few housekeeping issues. Do follow us, please, on our social media tags, which is @_Creative Access. You can tag both Stephenson and Yamin, and of course Creative Access. And if you want to answer any questions, ask any questions, I know quite a few people have submitted them in advance, but if you want to ask any during the conversation, there's a Q&A function at the bottom which you can see, and please submit them via that rather than the chat section. So that we'll do our best to cover as many of the questions as we can throughout, but depending on how we get on, we may not have time to answer all of them, but hopefully we'll get through quite a lot. So I'm going to stop talking because you haven't come here to hear me, but we're really, really chuffed to have both Yamin and Stephenson with us today. Stephenson, I don't know how long I've known you for, but a good few years, and it's been one of the greatest pleasures watching you emerge from working over at Green Door Pictures to seeing you on the stage in Hamilton. It was just the most exhilarating experience, and I know you're doing amazingly. We're really chuffed to have you with us today. Yamin, it's been also such a pleasure meeting you, only over this last year, but I know that you've already had a big impact on us in that small time, and we are hopefully, all being well, in the process of bringing somebody on board to your team at some point soon at the Hackney Empire. We were just talking, I had the pleasure of coming to see the pantomime last Christmas, and fingers and toes crossed that we can still come and see it this year as well. So I'm going to go offline and head over to you guys, and then I will catch up with you in half an hour or so. So Stephenson and Yamin, over to you.
Thanks, Josie. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Stephenson and I have had a brief catch up about kind of how to attack this. We had a phone call, when was it, 2 weeks ago, a week ago?
Yeah.
And we spoke for over an hour.
Yeah.
Probably closer to 2, and quickly realized that we're not going to be able to discuss everything that we want to talk about, but maybe this will be part 1. So yeah, starting with introductions. Yeah, my name is Yamin Choudhury. I'm the artistic director of the Hackney Empire. For those of you that don't know, Hackney Empire is a 1,200-seat theatre in Hackney, in London's East End. Opened in 1901. It's been open for 120 years. I took over 2 years ago as the Joint Chief Exec and Artistic Director, having worked there previously as an executive producer. And our priorities, our kind of values are essentially all built around access to the transformative effect of arts and culture, and trying to create a sector that is by all and for all. So that's a quick wrap up. I'm sure we'll build on that. But Stephenson?
Yeah. I'm Stephenson Ardern-Sodje. I'm an ex-Creative Access intern, so I actually moved down to London 2015, joined Green Door Pictures, who are a TV and film production company. I was placed there by Creative Access, and I got to do a little bit of behind-the-scenes kind of TV and film work, mainly scripted development, but also non-scripted and like some digital stuff as well. Lots of kind of, and some office-based stuff, loads of things. And then bizarrely kind of open auditioned for Hamilton, the West End musical, and got an offer to go train at the Royal Academy of Music. So they sent me to do my master's in musical theatre performance, and I did that for a year, and then jumped straight into Hamilton. I was in the original cast of Hamilton and stayed there for 2 years, and then I was just actually in rehearsals for the Globe Shakespeare tour while lockdown hit. So I've just been acting for like the past 2 or 3 years now, and then yeah, lockdown hit. But that's me.
How has the last 10 weeks been for you?
Good question. It's been an adjustment. I was in, like I was saying, I was in rehearsal, so I was kind of as sort of steady work as an actor can get, and I'm working 9 to 5, like really like getting deep into this stuff with an idea. And I kind of had we had a whole year's worth of touring planned. So, you know, my 2020 was planned out, like so many other people's, I'm sure, was planned out, and I really knew what I was going to do. And it all felt very tangible and very real, and then kind of had it all cut out from underneath us. So I'd say it's been a real roller coaster. Like, I've, you know, been through kind of feeling really sad about things, and then trying to make something really productive out of this, and then kind of feeling like overly, you know, like, oh my God, I've got to do something. And then the pressure of feeling like you have to do something when you're in the middle of this kind of pandemic really hits. And then you kind of say, no, let's just do nothing at all. So I've had a lot of emotion. What about you?
Yeah, it's been really difficult. It's been really, really difficult. It's hard. I mean, we'll build on all of these points, and it's hard to know where to start, but this was my first AD job at Hackney Empire. And I'd only been 2 years in the post. So then dealing with something as massive as this, when it comes to the national and international industry, has been challenging. And we've had to learn a lot on our feet. Joe Hemmant, who's the executive director, and myself, it was both of our first time being kind of chief execs of an organization. Yeah. So we've had to kind of be resilient and agile and responsive, professionally for our organization, and we're responsible for people. And there's a really interesting dynamic about having that additional level of responsibility for other people, and their well-being, and that's not just their professional well-being, but their mental and emotional well-being, and making sure that they feel included in the messaging around what is happening and the next steps. And working from home is a real challenge for that. So that's that. But mentally and emotionally, it's waves, man. It's good days and bad days, and trying not to put too much pressure on myself to consistently try to
produce,
but also just move myself forward, and just take time to be where we are currently and deal with the issues currently, as opposed to consistently trying to look 6 to 9 to 12 months down the line and start really pre-planning.
And I mean, you kind of mentioned it a little bit before we started up, but that kind of long distance view at the moment is so difficult to even fathom, isn't it? It's kind of like Josie kind of mentioned it being a bit of an existential crisis, but like planning 6 months down the line when government is constantly releasing like updates on what we can and can't do must be sort of difficult for you in your position.
Yeah, I mean, my background is being a freelancer, being self-employed, having my own businesses. And when you're in that mindset, you're dealing with yourself and your offer as a commodity within the industry. And that's one level of complexity. So then moving into running an organization, this, again, going back to this responsibility for other people, kind of trying to ensure that you're making the best decision, not only for yourself and your organization, but your entire team, when direction from legislators is so, in my opinion, lackluster. It is very, very challenging. It's tough, and it's hard because you second guess yourself.
Yeah.
So you commit to a decision based on what little information you have, and you just hope you're doing the right thing, doing the best thing. But it's getting to the stage now, and I don't think I'm the only one in terms of senior leadership of organizations, where we're going to have to start making really crucial long-term decisions. And it's a shame that there hasn't been more information to support those decisions, because they're going to have long-term ramifications on the kind of well-being of the sector.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure we'll like touch on that more as we go on. Can I ask you, just before we get too deep into it, can you kind of give us a bit of a description about what your role as an artistic director actually is? Because for me, even as somebody who is kind of in the industry, I feel like it kind of sits next to like the title of producer, in that I hear it a lot, and I kind of know that they're like in meetings and they're doing things, but if you ask me to like pin down exactly what an artistic director's like daily is, I don't know if I'd be able to do it. So it might be quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, most artistic directors, we do try to mystify the job, because then it makes us feel a little bit more self-important about what we actually do on a day-to-day basis. I mean, again, your job as an AD is going to be very, very specific to the organization or venue that you run. Yeah. So for myself, being the AD of Hackney Empire, to give it a bit of context, Hackney Empire is a receiving and a producing house. So that means that we take hires from external organizations and companies and partners, and then we also produce our own work. In that respect, it's really, really exciting because I'm not just relying on myself and my team's creativity to fuel what we platform in terms of ideas and stories, but we're trying to develop relationships with the best storytellers from around the country, if not the world, to be able to house them at Hackney Empire and give our audiences and our communities access to these ideas. So essentially my job, alongside Joe Hemmant, who's the executive director and joint chief exec with me, our job is a lot of people management. So ensuring that our teams are delivering exactly what our business plan needs them to deliver. So the business plan is something that Joe and I formulated as soon as we came in. So we revised the business plan for Hackney Empire in order to point it in a new direction. And then it's our job to with the board is to steer our teams towards ticking off aims and ambitions and goals on that kind of methodology.
Yeah.
So a lot of people management, a lot of planning and administration and management of the organization, a lot of meetings, and trying to identify opportunity artistically and professionally. Interestingly, I've never felt as far away from the art since becoming an artistic director.
Really? I mean, yeah, because I was going to say the language that you're using, and I think it's one of those things that, like, the further up the chain in any kind of industry you get, the further away from the daily thing that kind of business creates, I suppose. But you're using a lot of interesting kind of business language and, like, you know, sort of management language. And do you think that is like that stuff that you can port from, like, your previous jobs and previous, like, experience points? Is something
absolutely. And again, I think it would vary if you had another 5 ADs sitting here with you.
Yeah.
The answers would differ massively. But for me, I had no dreams of becoming an artistic director. It wasn't something that was in the plan for me. What actually happened was that Hackney Empire was in really bad shape. It needed a new direction and a new blood to kind of push it forward and have dreams for it again. And I care deeply about Hackney Empire because of my history with the building, and how it's helped me in the past. And so this opportunity came up. And in that respect, my ideology around being an AD isn't, and this might sound offensive to some people, but it isn't based around my sense of ego. This is an opportunity for me to platform my ideas and my voice and my opinions on the world. This is me understanding what Hackney Empire did for me as a young man coming from where I came from in terms of engagement, and wanting to create that opportunity for everybody and for Hackney Empire to be able to do that into the future. And so in that sense, I don't need to be artistic. There are plenty of people such as yourself with incredible artistic minds and brains who are doing really interesting, exceptional, radical stuff that I just want to be at Hackney Empire. So, and again, Empire was in bad shape when we took over. So it was a really quick and easy decision early on that I'm going to be more business. I'm going to be more development. I'm going to be more PR and branding than trying to artistically produce on the stage. And I'm perfectly happy with that decision. A lot of ADs are much more involved in the actual arts on the stage than I am, but that just didn't feel like the priority that I needed to have at that point in time.
Can I kind of like touching on that, and like you kind of said, like, interesting, like, it's interesting that you say that when you came to Hackney Empire, it kind of felt like it wasn't in the best shape. So maybe if we go back to, like, your relationship with it, if, you know, looking at that from a purely business perspective, that might not have been the thing to go into for, you know, for your best kind of next career step. So what is it about Hackney Empire, you know, as a building, and as, like, your personal experience with that, like, what is it that sort of drew you to it, that connects you to it initially, and like, if you were sort of pitching it to us now, like, why is it such an important silhouette on the theatre landscape in the UK?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. In order to do that, we've got to backtrack. So I grew up in Haringey in Tottenham and areas, surrounding areas like Wood Green. Fell into the trappings of what most young people that I was associated with at that time kind of fell into in the 80s and 90s, and made a series of bad decisions that got worse and worse, and dug myself a deeper and deeper hole. And had an exceptional stroke of luck in being connected with two organizations primarily that really gave me the opportunity to see a wider horizon for myself. Those two opportunities were Haringey Shed and Hackney Empire. Haringey Shed is our inclusive theatre company for young people based in Tottenham. At the time, it was based behind White Hart Lane Stadium in an area called Northumberland Park. And at Haringey Shed, I met a woman called Susie McKenna, and Susie McKenna was the then creative director, or was about to become the creative director of Hackney Empire at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was 18 or 19 years old, and I was really going through a very, very difficult period in my life. I was lost. I was very, very isolated. And I was just about to, or just had experienced homelessness for the first time. And so it was a really rough patch. Anyway, Susie spotted something in me when I was volunteering at Haringey Shed, and just invited me to come down to Hackney Empire when I was 18. This is in the very early 2000s. And so I went to Hackney Empire and basically lived there for about a month, 2 months. And I sat behind the sound desk in the stalls, and I just watched everything. Everything. It didn't matter what it was. Everything from music to comedy to musicals to, variety and cabaret and opera. And I was just blown away. Mm. I was enraptured by what I was seeing, because I had no idea that this existed prior to that. And Susie had only invited me just as a bonce, you know what I mean? She just saw something that she liked in me and just wanted me to see a theatre, knowing that I'd never been to one before. And that really catalyzed, or was a catalyzing moment for me in terms of creating a direction for me and a shape for the rest of my life. And that access was something that I was refused to let go of. I didn't want to live a life that didn't have this glamour and excitement and intrigue that the Hackney Empire provided me.
Yeah.
It was like a drug. I couldn't picture going cold turkey. And so went off, did my own thing, became a producer, did a lot more work with Haringey Shed, and really developed a portfolio and CV for myself that, I was fairly successful and I was getting to be known, et cetera, et cetera. And at the time I was living in Hong Kong. Susie called me back and said that they were redeveloping the young people's work at Hackney Empire, and she wanted me to do it. That was in 2012 for the Olympics, yeah. And so I came back and started gigging with them again. But, that was, almost 10 years ago. It's 8 years ago now. Essentially, I owe Hackney Empire everything. There's nothing I wouldn't do for it. Yeah. And so while it wasn't part of a plan, that was exactly why I had to do it.
Of course.
Because it wasn't based around the idea of me and my self-importance. It was the dream that I'd had when I was an 18-year-old, watching opera for the first time, and Hoffman, who's the technical manager, who is still a technical manager now, sensing I was bored and going on my phone, basically grabbing my head and telling me to pay attention because I was going to learn something.
Yeah.
They didn't do that because it mattered for an Arts Council funding application. They did it because they thought it was important to do that for a young 18-year-old, lost young people. And if Hackney Empire can be that in the arts and culture landscape, then for me, it's the most important venue in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, when we spoke before, you said something which I literally wrote down immediately. You said that everything I've done has been designed to make theatre feel like a home for everyone. And it feels like that's kind of you know, what Hackney like provided for you at that point?
Yeah, it was somewhere I didn't have to dress up. It was somewhere where I didn't have to have airs and graces. I didn't have to talk in a certain way to feel accepted. It was somewhere that I looked around and could actually picture myself sitting amongst the audience, as opposed to feeling like an outsider. It was the most, and then in a weird way, it kind of skewed my perception of what the arts and culture sector was actually like. Because then I thought, oh, this is what theatre's like. And then I went to other theaters and realized how exceptional it was. Do you know what I mean? And then that just made me even more passionate about it. But I love Empire. There's literally nothing I wouldn't do for this organization, because in many respects it saved my life. And if me talking like that, when it was literally just a stopping off point,
yeah,
when I was 18, this wasn't a measured, planned moment. This just happened to be a branching series of pathways that led me there. Now, if I had that experience, imagine how many hundreds of thousands of people have had that experience over 120 years of this venue's life.
Yeah.
It has to exist for another 120 years. If it doesn't, it's a crime. And if it doesn't, I haven't fulfilled my obligations in terms of the whole reason why I entered this sector in the first place, was because arts and culture transformed my ability to understand myself, to understand others, to understand environments and politics and societies. And if it did that for me, it can do that for everybody. And that's the point of it. For me, the point isn't the best story. For me, the point is the most effective way of communicating. And in my opinion, when theatre is at its best, it's a juggernaut. It's unstoppable in terms of making you feel and sense transformation and change in people.
Yeah,
it's magical. But that was my route. What about yours? Because I know when we spoke, I was fascinated by the kind of equinox of your journey. So yeah, tell us about how you got started.
Mine's, I mean, I never really, you know, I've always been a fan of theatre, I suppose, storytelling in more general, and just like watching stuff. You know, I'm kind of a big TV fan. I'm a big films fan. I like going to the theatre. I'm not from London. I'm from a little town called Shrewsbury, which is in the West Midlands, and we have like a tiny, at the time they had just this tiny theatre that little sort of touring productions and pantos and stuff would go to. So I'd go and see, you know, maybe a show or two a year, but it was never really anything I thought was like something I could do, you know. And I did a bit of Amdram at school. I did drama GCSE, but I think the distance for me between what I was doing and feeling like I could do and the people that were on stage, you know, the polished, completely amazing kind of shows that would come through and then disappear again. You just don't know how you could possibly make that leap, and the gap kind of felt massive to me. So I never pursued it. I went to Brunel University and I did English and creative writing. Mainly because I kind of didn't know what else to do, and English is a very broad thing. You know, you feel like you're like, oh, that's safe. I've not closed any doors. So I did that, but at uni, I ended up kind of doing more time spent in the like drama department, performing and doing musicals and singing and doing whatever else than I was doing my coursework. So kind of came out, didn't know what I wanted to do, and then still kind of just was like, okay, I've got a writing degree. Maybe I could do something writing, and I got this thing with Green Door through Creative Access, which was such a random kind of happenstance. You know, I just saw, like, a friend of mine was like, oh, you should apply for this, went in, got it. And then working in a sort of busy creative environment, it kind of feels, I suppose, similarly to the experience, like the way you described your experience with Hackney, but getting through the door is just the first step, because the moment you're in there, you know, I started meeting creatives when they weren't on full 100% form. You know, they come in and they have a chat and they have a coffee, and you go, oh, I've seen you on TV and you seem like this unbelievable kind of polished thing, but actually you're like just a bloke, or you're just a woman, and you do this, and then you do the practice, you do the work, and then you know, for 10 minutes when you have to record, you're doing this, or when you're on stage for 2 hours, you're doing this. And it really demystified and kind of deconstructed it for me. And it made me feel a lot more like, oh, it's not gods and, you know, like mythical people. It's just people who work hard and want to do it. And so then when I saw that Hamilton were auditioning, or having open auditions, a friend of mine was like, oh, you should send a video in. And I did send a video in on the off chance. They called me in. I had to audition and sing. I think I had 9 rounds of auditions. and I auditioned for maybe 7 of the characters in the show. And then at the end of it, they were like, oh, you know, we really liked you, but we just think you haven't got any experience. You've never done this before. So like, it's a no from now, but we'd love to know what show you're doing next. And I was like, oh, I'm not really doing a show. Like, that's not my life. Like, you know, I'm just gonna go back to working in this office and I'll never do this again. And they were like, oh, would you consider training? And they actually paid for my training, so sent me on a scholarship to RAM, and then pulled me out to, like, I graduated early to go and join Hamilton. But literally, like, if I hadn't kind of taken that chance and just like jumped in, then it would have, you know, never would have happened, and it wouldn't have even been something I felt like I was missing. Yeah. But from the moment I started at Hamilton, I was like, oh yeah, this is a culmination of all the things that I enjoy doing in the same, you know, in this one specific thing. And kind of like you said, theatre at its best, it feels like nothing else, you know, and that immediate reaction, that conversation you're having with the audience, it feels so live and it feels so like full of possibility and different every night. You know, I did maybe just under 600 performances of that show, and it's the same material every night, but you can pinpoint so many different moments where you're like, oh, this show feels so much better, you know. And a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday like matinee or whatever is so different to a Saturday night show, and so like I learned so much from that. And it really was just kind of like, when you look back over it, it kind of looks like maybe there was a bit of a plan, but kind of similarly to you, like it was a single thing that happened that just like turned my head slightly and pointed me in a different direction, and then here we are.
I think we both benefited. As much as our stories are different, they are the same. And we both absolutely benefited from the ignorance is bliss principle. And I know we spoke about this before.
Yeah.
But not being inhibited by the fear of what could come next.
Absolutely.
Because we both went in so blind and ignorant in many, or at least for myself.
I know, I'd agree. Yeah, it's that like I mean, I mentioned it when we talked before, but I had an audition with like a guy called Alex Lackamore, who is one of the co-writer of Hamilton. You know, he orchestrated it and he does a lot of the music. And I had no idea who he was. You know, I walked in and there was this American guy behind a piano, and he's like, "Hey, Stephenson, it's great to see you. You know, we love you to sing this song and this song." And I'm like, "Cool, great." And then I told some of my friends who are a bit more theatre savvy afterwards, and they were like, "You know, that guy has like 13 Tonys. You know, he's like like this huge name guy." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And if I'd known that walking in, I wouldn't have been there butchering his music, but with a real, you know, with like a confidence that I had, as if I was like, "Yeah, I can do this. It's easy." And I'd have been so much more sort of scared to make that leap. So I think you're so right. Like, it was an armor in a way.
And I think that's a really old school mentality that we have to change. And particularly, you know, all the people who are here watching you and I talk today, that's their responsibility, to actually ignore the system of the hierarchical systems that we have self-imposed upon ourselves as a sector.
Yeah.
Because the idea, that fear of, but I'm a nobody and they're a somebody, so where does my value lie? I think actually enables the vicious cycle of lack of representation and lack of diversity of thought that is present within the sector.
I really agree.
And you have to be bullish going forward. If I had at any point, and same for you, Stephenson, without putting words in your mouth, is if we had known how slim our chances were going in, we might not have been so naively driven to attain these ambitions.
Yeah, I mean,
naivety is a real strength, actually, because if you think about the lack of representation and the percentages,
it's terrifying.
It almost becomes easy to rationalize the pointlessness of it all.
Absolutely, because you look out there and you go, well, no one looks like me, no one from my background, you know, no one like me has done what I want to do. So how is that possible? And actually, sometimes we have to kick down that door and be the first person.
And know that there is support around you in order to make those changes. As difficult as it seems.
Messaged. I didn't realize how quickly we'd gone through. We're already halfway through, so she suggested maybe we move on to some of the questions.
You know what it is? I do these regularly, and time flies by when you actually want to dig down deep into some ideas. But like I said, maybe this is part one, and maybe we can have a part two.
That'd be nice.
Want to start? Do you want to get started with some of these questions?
Yeah, I got one which I put at the top, which I think is we've kind of touched on briefly, but I think it's such a common one that everybody always asks. From Corey, how do you overcome imposter syndrome, and how do you deal with negative criticism?
Yeah, I haven't overcome imposter syndrome. I suffer imposter syndrome every single day, particularly in some of the spaces that I enter. Looking the way I do, speaking the way I do, you are the odd one out.
Yeah.
And it's particularly when your viewpoint is so scarce within these conversations, it's very easy to feel like people are looking at you as if you're only being purposefully provocative, as opposed to actually trying to make a point. And that really does enforce the system of other within me.
Absolutely.
I've got a great friend called Charmaine Lovegrove. She's the most senior Black woman in publishing in the UK. She runs an imprint for Hachette called Dialogue Books. She's an incredible woman. We gave a TEDx talk together, and she doesn't suffer with it at all. She has no imposter syndrome because her sense of value and sense of self is so strong that it just goes above her head. She just moves through it.
Yeah.
And that is what I aspire to be. So my answer is, don't punish yourself for not being able to deal with it on a day-to-day basis, for not feeling vulnerable or feeling, angry, because I absolutely do. Unfortunately, this is just what we have to put up with until we're able to completely radicalize what the sector looks like. But what about you?
I think the way that I deal with it, because I will agree, I definitely have it in spades, and in terms of like dealing with negative criticism, it hits you, and you can get 100 compliments, but that one negative comment is going to be the one that wakes you up at 2 a.m, isn't it? But the way I kind of deal with it is I have a lot of I've worked quite hard to surround myself with people whose opinions I value, who I believe will call me out when I'm not correct, but will support me when I am correct. And when I have moments like that, or when I'm worried about an upcoming thing, or, I've got an audition, but I don't know if I'm worthy of it, I'll kind of take it to to my group, and we'll talk about it and deconstruct it. And I think you surround yourself with people that you trust and people who understand your opinion, because like you said, more often than not, we are the only person in that room with our viewpoint and with our own lived experience. So I think having other people who understand that feeling can help you just realize that you're not alone in it,
Absolutely. But and you do have to reinforce that independently. You really do. And you're going to see the similarities between you and people and the differences between you and people. That's what we are confronted with every day. And that's actually the beauty of living in a society as democratic as ours.
Yeah.
In theory. Stephenson, how old are you?
I am 28.
28. Yeah. You've achieved a huge amount in your time. Karen asked, how to get started, pursue and maintain a successful career in theatre at 25 years. I'm guessing Karen's 25 years old.
Yeah.
What do you have for her?
That's a good question. I mean, I find that a difficult question to answer because, I probably started in theatre when I was 20. I might be auditioned for Hamilton when I was 25. But I think really, my path has been incredibly difficult to replicate, I suppose. But I think the only answer I can give is take chances, take opportunities, look for those things. I like now it kind of feels like a foregone conclusion that I was going to be in this big show and do this thing. And, once you've got your foot in the door, you can start moving. But it was a completely rogue opportunity. And like you said, if I'd stopped to think about how unlikely it was that someone with no professional theatre credits was going to get into that show, was going to do that, I would never have submitted the video,
Yeah.
So I think maybe my advice, it's a bit vague, but it's don't ever let the first no come from you. There are plenty of people who are going to tell you, when you get in through the door, that you're not necessarily qualified enough, that you're not necessarily quite there. But luckily, and I wasn't really, but luckily for me, because I'd said yes to myself first and gone for that audition, they suggested an alternative route, and they went, you're not quite ready, but would you go train? And then they facilitated that training. But if I decided before I even went, I'm not quite ready for it, I shouldn't do it, it would never have happened. And I think age is that's 25. You feel so old. But now, even at 28, I'm back and I'm like, man, if I was 25 again, I could do so much more. If I had those 3 years, and I know you'll continue, and I'm sure, you feel the same. 25, if you had your time again, you were 25 again, all the things you could accomplish. It's not
Absolutely.
It's not that should stop you from pursuing anything.
No, I mean, listen, I was getting banged up when I was 18, and that was 16 years ago. That was less than half of my life ago.
Yeah.
Transformation is as quick as you need it or want it to be.
Exactly.
I love what you just said. Don't let the first no come from you. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I really believe that.
Up on my wall.
But it's true, and so often you see that, or your friends do it. You know, they go, "Oh, you suggest like, oh, you should audition for this," and they go, "Oh, I'm not sure." And I'm like, "Well, what? Why though? What is stopping you? Really, you know you'd like to be in the show, or you know you want to do that job, or you know you want to go to that place. Like, try and make it happen, and at least then, when somebody else shuts you down, you know you did what you could."
Yeah, yeah. And if it isn't working for you, don't feel you can't tear it down.
Yes.
Don't feel like we are constantly waiting for people to open the doors in the walls that they have built.
Mm-hmm.
You can't wait for people to open doors for you all the time. Sometimes you have to go in a completely different direction. And if one thing that COVID-19 has proven to us all is that the innovators will thrive.
Exactly.
So this is your opportunity. I'm talking to everybody who's listening to this. Innovate, radicalize, revolutionize. Don't expect the establishment, people we think of as having all the answers and all the ideas, lead the way. They don't have the lived experience or general experience that you do, So utilize that, utilize those ideas, utilize those experiences that you have. Be cutting edge, be exciting. That's how you thrive, in my opinion, and completely reframe models of success. A model of success within this industry isn't based on finances. It isn't based on reputation, in my opinion.
I agree.
Got a little bit passionate there, so.
That's good. I love it. Soraya has asked us, given just because you touched on COVID-19, given the uncertain future for the industry, how do you think virtual theatre performances could be made more sustainable? Do we have any other options for our own creative output and keeping the industry alive? And I kind of think that you touched on that with, innovate. But I would love to know what your opinion on virtual theatre is, because it's all over the place at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I don't know. I don't know. And it kind of reinforces what I just said before. I am an artistic director in the UK of one of the biggest venues in London outside of the West End, and I don't know. Mm-hmm. And trust me, most artistic directors and chief execs from across the sector don't know.
That's true.
It's up to you to think about your community, your audiences, and how they want to interact with you, and figure out what the best way is to communicate with them and engage their participation. I guess for me personally, virtual theatre kind of is an anathema to what I love about theatre. It's what you were talking about 600 performances of Hamilton or Hamilton. Yeah. Every show, there's a different emotional cloud in the middle of the auditorium.
Agreed.
That everybody donates to. And when you work in the theatre, or when you're performing or whatever, in a theatre, you absorb the energies from that cloud. That's what I love. That's what I feed off. So I don't know how I feel about virtual theatre. It absolutely has a market and a necessity right now. But personally, it doesn't excite me as much as live theatre does. But maybe that's because I haven't experienced the real fantastic new way of doing it yet.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think?
You know what, actually, I do have kind of some opinions on it. I've watched a few different pieces. I think they've had varying levels of impact on me personally. And I think sometimes I'm like, okay, I can kind of get involved in this. And other times I'm watching it thinking, man, I wish I was in that theatre, because the production's great, but it's not translating for me. I think my worry about virtual theatre, and it maybe is kind of a worry that will carry over for post-COVID, is I feel like a lot of what's been released and a lot of what's been produced has to become something a little bit more commercially minded in terms of like getting those eyes on something. So we've seen a lot of things being put out recently where it's like a big name from TV, or like, a recognizable film star in an iconic role in a classic play, which is usually written by a straight white male from before the 21st century, and I kind of worry that mode of kind of like shoring up and putting stuff out that's going to be much more, that is going to either bring people in or get eyes on it, might suggest that when we when we do move out of this, people will be looking for more sure things and like potentially being less like innovative with their programming. But I don't know, that's...
I mean, you're absolutely right. Our sector generally is risk averse when it comes to experimental voices. And unfortunately, we exist at a time where any kind of diversity of ethnicity, culture, gender, sexuality, age, even class is seen as risky. And our sector has always played it safe. So I don't expect, and I say we because I'm complicit in that, I'm part of it now, being an AD. I don't expect us to suddenly create the next incredible, exciting piece that explores things that theatre has never explored before. That's where this could be a great leveler and a real great method of democratizing output. If you have a camera and access to the internet, create it, write it now, get together with your friends or your network, contact Josie, myself, Stephenson, contact us and see if we can enable you. And hopefully you're going to change how me and Stephenson both feel about virtual theatre by the sound.
Question from Lau. How do you engage new members from marginalized groups in a meaningful way that enables them to thrive within areas of the arts that they previously felt excluded from? I think that's quite an interesting question.
Wow. How do you engage new members?
If you had the answer to that, you'd be a millionaire, wouldn't you?
If I had, or sadly, maybe not.
Yeah, true.
How do you engage new members from marginalized groups? You don't engage them as the end product. You engage them as the creative source. You engage them as the beginning point. You centralize your communities to the conversations that you have as a creative. You don't see them as the end commodity or product. It baffles me. It blows my mind that we still talk about audiences at the end of proposals and documents regarding theatre and live performance. They should be first and foremost in how we formulate our approaches. And until they are, we're going to carry on seeing underrepresentation of people that surround us and people like us. Marginalization happens when the power is taken away from a group of people. And in order to rectify that, we have to start giving the power back.
Yeah.
And creating more equality in who is enabled to share. And that's what theatre is all about. It's about sharing. And what's bizarre about it is that we have this weird way of saying isolate you as being deserving of the opportunity to share, and you lot have to wait until so-and-so selects you have the opportunity to share. So put them at the center, put them at the beginning. Wrap everything that you think and feel about your product around the people.
That, like, the easiest thing for me in terms of like visual way in which like that backs up your statement there as well is like when you look at certain productions like Barbershop, like Nine Night, like Misty, there is not a problem with activating like marginalized groups and exciting them to go to the theatre. I went to see Barbershop twice in its first and second run, and both times was like the blackest experience I've had in theatre. Do you know what I mean? That like it was because it's a product that was created authentically for that group of people. They and then marketed enough to sort of get to them. And I still think it could have been done. We kind of talked about how like even more like connection could have been made with those people. But if you create the product, they will come. It's sort of tale as old as time, isn't it?
Well, it's their story.
Yeah,
it's their story. This is we spend so much time thinking about the people on the stage that are the mouthpieces for the story, that we're not focused enough on what heart and what soul the story actually originates from. And those pieces that you just spoke about, they're all categorically signposts that diversity of thought in terms of the productivity of our sector is not only ethically valuable and morally valuable, but financially valuable.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like you program one non-white, sort of able kind of thing because you need to as a sort of a balance for just to
can exercise. Absolutely. Yeah. But we need to take theatre back. If theatre is something that we feel isn't going to be obsolete to the vast majority of people, then as a community, we have to take theatre back. And in order to encourage a 17-year-old from the estate that I grew up on in Tottenham to go to the theatre, I have to give him a product or her a product that is going to resonate with them.
Absolutely.
And maybe I'm not even the best person to create that, but maybe somebody here is. So we just have to really embrace ideas.
There's a question from Nadia, which I think is quite interesting, just in terms of what people can do right now. What sort of training or experience could you recommend people getting involved in while stuck at home, so that when they get to the other side of the pandemic, they've added more to their CVs and portfolios? I don't know that I necessarily have an answer for that, but I thought maybe you would have something, and I'm sure I've got a few sort of ideas.
Yeah. So you know what? After I kind of started re-engaging with my own future, as opposed to just being a victim of my circumstance, I went back to uni and I studied drama and theatre studies. And nobody has ever asked me for my degree. Ever. You know, it wasn't pointless, but the piece of paper is not valuable. The experience was valuable. So what I would suggest is, it's really simple and maybe you know, not as trained in on one thing as Nadia might want it to be, but just upskill generally. I think all experience and all training is valuable to a creative process. So take advantage of everything that you can. And in the same way that Stephenson, you were saying, you took English because English is, you know, adaptable. And you can facilitate lots of different experiences with English. Similarly, if you want to do photography, train your eye. If you want to learn sign language, learn, you know, other different ways of communicating, upskill any part of yourself. I would absolutely recommend strongly looking at what other people are doing, looking at what venues and organizations that resonate with you are offering at this point in time, and starting to engage those networks. At least that's a practical thing I can give you, because once you know them and once they know you, the barrier for entry will have dropped significantly.
Agreed. That's something I actually I wrote down that I really wanted to say is which I totally think like latches onto that, is like, reach out to people, not just when you want something from them, but when you admire what they're doing. You know, your peers and your sort of superiors, or, you know, people who are further along in their career than you, because there is nothing better for somebody whose work you admire or whose work ethic you admire than for you to just send them a tweet or send them a message on Instagram or whatever, just saying, hey, just want to say I saw you in this show, or I see you produced this, it really spoke to me, I loved it. You know, they'll remember that, they'll remember you. And if you're somebody who then, because the theatre industry and, you know, the arts industry in the UK in general is so small that you will then run into them at some point, and that first barrier has already been crossed, and they will remember that, you know, that you came to them before you wanted something, just to say, I see you, I see what you're doing, and I really respect it.
As you say, in last question, I would just add to that really quickly before our last question. If you want to be on stage or off stage as a writer, director, producer, whatever, learn about the stage, learn about lights and sound, stage management, production management. It will all provide an invaluable insight into the career that you want to progress in. And that is absolutely applicable for TV and film, etc. If I may, Stephenson, I know we've already spoken about it in terms of imposter syndrome, but I think I would like the last question to be from Antonia. She says, hi guys, I sometimes struggle to realize where I find my place in the theatre industry as someone from an ethnic minority. How do you manage that mentality?
Yeah, good question. And I think not an easy one, and something that I think people, regardless of where they are in the sort of theatre world or theatre, you know, the levels of a theatre world, probably still struggle from that, because we're always a minority. We're always people whose opinions are going to be the sort of minority in the room. I was incredibly lucky, and I kind of think similarly to what you said about your first start in Hackney, is that my start in theatre was in Hamilton, where, you know, it is one of the most diverse shows in the West End, and as a result I was surrounded by a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, and it kind of gave me a feeling that you belong because of what you bring to that team. You know, like, there were people who had never done theatre before but had danced, had done backing for sort of pop stars, you know, all over the globe, and they were the most incredible people in their skill set, but they didn't have a banging CV. So I think sometimes what I would say is you need to have a really strong core sense of self. You need to know what it is that you bring into a room that no one can take away from you. And I think that often helps me. You know, I know what I can do and I know what I bring to a room. And I've sat at home and really thought about that and made a sort of, you know, made a mental list. So I know that when I'm going into somewhere, this is what I bring to the table that can't be stripped away from me.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think that's a really great answer. For me, myself, all I would add to that is my personal kind of lens on it. I'm angry about it. I'm pissed off about it. I'm pissed off that we still have to argue that this is valuable. I'm pessimistic and cynical about change, and that makes me want to fight for it even more, so that hopefully people, the future generations, will benefit from the riot that I want to start. I use that to fuel me. And I don't know if that's the healthiest way of doing it, emotionally, mentally. I have no idea, but that's how I deal with it, in the sense that it needs to be here. And if I can, in some small way, act as a gatekeeper to future access and help alleviate that strain from someone like you, Antonia, then that's what fuels me. And just one last thing, what Stephenson said earlier, your network isn't just the people that you know who can benefit you in terms of your next professional choice.
Exactly.
You know, your friends and your family, the people you have around you to support you when you feel down, to remind you of, you know, that you're not alone in dealing with those feelings. That's key.
What you've just said there really reminded me. I know we're kind of like on this, but in terms of that network, look around you at home and look around you at the people who look like you, who you know have never experienced theatre in the way you've experienced it. Like, one thing that really hit me that I never realized was going to happen. My dad's one of 10, like a big Nigerian family, and most of my aunts and uncles have never been to the theatre before. You know, weren't really interested in it. And I had them all come on separate days, you know, like come and see me in Hamilton, and brought them on stage after the show. And the way that they looked at me, and the way they looked at the building, and the way that they were like, this is a place, you know, like most of them had never stepped foot in a theatre before. So I genuinely be like, look at your aunts, look at your uncles, look at your grandparents, look at your mum and dad, and think about why theatre speaks to you, and the stories that they deserve, like the feeling, because everyone deserves to have that feeling. Your family deserves to have that feeling. And if you want to be in the industry and you're worried about like deserving to do it for you, do it for them. You know what I mean? Do it for your community, do it for people, because the moment that they come into that theatre and they see what theatre means to you through their own eyes, it's worth it. And you're like, oh yeah, cool, that's it.
Absolutely. Josie, you wrote down that we could have one more. And
I know, but you said so long asking that one that I'm not sure. Okay, I mean, okay, you can have one more quick one. I was just actually looking at the questions. Do you want to choose one, or do you want me to choose one?
Go for it. You do it.
Okay, so what I was going to say is, somebody's asked, it just seems to have disappeared, I think because I've upvoted it. Oh yeah, Martha. She talks about, is it important to preserve our theatre buildings because of their significance in the community? Or do you think one of the answers is to include marginalised people in taking them out rather than being in traditional spaces? And I know we talked about virtual theatre, but what's your view on sort of being in sort of traditional settings?
Hold on.
Yeah. I was about to swear. I won't. You know, who cares what's traditional?
Yeah.
Who cares? Who cares? I love Hackney Empire because of what it provided for me. It's very traditional in terms of its setup. It's a theatre. It's a proscenium arch. All that nonsense. Who gives a shit? Let's absolutely take it to them. Absolutely take it back from them. But understand that Hackney Empire and these traditional places were built to democratize access to the platform. Mm-hmm. Hackney Empire was built to be on the doorstep of the people who couldn't access the West End in the 1900s. And thereby it is for you. These spaces are for you. Traditional spaces are there to pronounce and validate tradition. And our traditions are valuable regardless of our ethnic, cultural, whatever, religious background. Wherever you can put the story on, put it on, and make the people listen, and find the people who are excitable enough and irrational enough, like myself, to say, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's find a way to do it. And thereby create the support structures that you need to tell your stories.
Yeah.
I mean, you are so empowering. I think we do need to start a revolution, and you can lead us, Yamin. Listen, we've got so many questions, and we haven't lost anyone on the way, which is a pretty good sign. So everyone's been enthralled listening to you guys and me.
We've got to do a part 2, Josie.
Yeah, we'll definitely do a part 2. But well, vote on the chat if you'd like them to continue. Or maybe, and well, actually, on that note, we're going to send everybody around a feedback form, so it'll be really helpful to get your view on it. But Taz is saying yes, please. Let's do another one. But listen, it was so brilliant. I'm so privileged to have you guys with us, as I said from the outset, and it was such an interesting, stimulating, inspiring conversation, uplifting, so many words, and I think that and thoughtful, really thoughtful. So I really appreciate both of you kind of bearing your hearts and opening up to the community, because I know that we've already had amazing feedback on social media even while you've been talking. So everyone else watching, on the subject of performance, next week next Thursday we're being joined by the cast and crew of a new BBC One drama which is about the Windrush scandal, and it's going to be really exciting, and it's produced by Left Bank Pictures, and there'll be some of the actors but also the team and the producer and director behind it. So please do join us. You can go onto our website and log on under the news and events section. We're also running lots of employability workshops for people. So for example, next Wednesday we've got someone from the BBC talking about how to ace an online interview. We're doing like CV workshops, all sorts of things, and there's tons of resources on our website for those of you that are struggling with finance, access to finance, with mental health issues, with anything you want. We try to put together as much as possible. And on that note, one last thing I'm going to say is when you log off, leave this meeting, you will be there'll be a survey that will come up on your screen, and we're just conducting a short piece of work. It'll take you about 90 seconds of your time just to really understand how you've been impacted by COVID and how we can support you, because it's really important that all our work is very much, you know, driven by you and what you would find useful. So I'm going to stop there, but just say thank you so much to you, Stephenson and Yamin, and thank you all of you for joining us. And we've had lots of lovely comments on the chat, so appreciate you doing that. And we hope to see you very soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.